Hi guys! So this week we're talking about bloated, risk-averse AAA franchises, at least in part. So of course I wanted to show you footage from the new Call of Duty. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure Activision is not gonna let me do that. So instead we're just gonna show footage from a bunch of other Army games. I mean, that's just as good, right? Greetings! I'm the Game Overthinker, and today I'm here to tell you you are all being lied to. Wait, stop. I'm not talking about the election, I promise. Come on back. We're living through a moment in gaming culture where the market has become severely stratified, not between consoles or degrees of devotion or geography like in the old days, but by level of production. Whereas once upon a time it felt like games came in many different sizes and levels of polish, and you could see that spectrum easily reflected on store shelves, in sales charts, and in media coverage, today it feels more and more like a black and white split between two extremes. Huge, bloated, feature-packed, multi-million-dollar blowouts grouped under the AAA umbrella on one hand, and scrappy, low-budget, lower-tech affairs typically referred to as independents more as a matter of course than semantic accuracy. Not saying that this is 100% the case, but it's enough of the case to feel like it's 100% the case. Now that would be bad enough in and of itself in terms of either perception or reality, but this particular stratification has a whole other layer of unpleasantness spread on top of it. Not only is there now a widespread tendency within the culture to assume that games now only come in two flavors, but also that only one of those flavors is any good for you. Or alternately, that only one of them is actually any fun. Where have I heard that before?
Great hate, left filling! Great hate, left filling!
Yes, so goes the new thinking. When it comes to video games, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Either you want the high-minded, intellectually satisfying artistic ambitions of the indie scene, in which case you're going to be limited to smaller, more modest experiences often built around a cost-saving, retro aesthetic, or you want a big, shiny, exciting blockbuster experience, in which case you're going to get a cliche-ridden mass-market product with artistic value slightly lower than your average Michael Bay production. We have effectively been told that no matter how we game, we now have to settle. You prefer a big experience? Well, you're just going to have to settle for subpar storyline, lack of depth, and little to no interest in artistic or intellectual growth. And if you do want those things, you're going to have to settle there as well, for a smaller experience likely in the framework of whatever aesthetic the art game trendsters are fixated on at that particular moment. Speaking of which, I've had kind of a distracting week, so somebody help me out here. Are we still on the everything has to look like a Genesis RPG phase, or did we segue back over to everything looks like Steven Universe? And not only are we told that this is the new normal of gaming, our price to pay for AAA production costs spiraling out of control and the only reliable big spenders in the consumer base being core gamers as defined by marketing departments in 2001, we're told that it's the only way forward, that this is to be our future. The big boys are just going to keep getting dumber, the art gamer scene is just going to keep getting more and more niche and really self-consciously arty, and the two will just grow further and further apart, save for like 3 or 4 releases that everyone can kind of get on the same page about once a year or so. And this, my friends, is a false choice. You are being lied to. Not by any single individual person or source, though. This is a collective cultural lie, the kind that a few people tell themselves, then a few more, until it becomes a general easy assumption. And it didn't come about without at least a kernel of truth. We are indeed living through one of the medium's all-or-nothing periods, at least in the broad strokes. But the idea that we have to be, that this is some kind of natural order that we should just accept, that's a bald-faced untruth. And it's not one we used to buy into. This medium is not that old, folks, and it wasn't that long ago that some of our biggest games and our most important artistic and narrative achievements were one and the same, even if it wasn't acknowledged right in the moment. Think about Ocarina of Time building its titular mechanic around a metaphor for the sense of loss and melancholy that can come with maturity at the precise moment its series' founding fanbase was itself struggling with growing up. Consider the wry socio-political humor woven throughout the Maniac Mansion games, or Full Throttle, or Fallout. Recall the deconstructionist self-satire of the various Mario RPGs, the strong stated environmental themes and New Age spiritualism of Final Fantasy VII. Missile Command was an intentionally grim reflection of early 80s Cold War nuclear fears. The goddamn Kirby games often explore the moral gray area between good and evil, and that's all without even mentioning the more obvious auteur sensibilities of Hideo Kojima, Suda51, or Will Wright. Hell, guys like David Cage and Peter Molyneux can't really seem to get it right these days, but at least they're trying. You can even find enlightening examples outside of gaming, specifically in the movies, which is ironic considering that we got into this mess in part because video games won't stop wanting to be Hollywood. The most talked about big-budget action movie of this past summer turned out to be Mad Max Fury Road, which drew the expected adulation of action fans for being an R-rated, ultra-violent, post-apocalyptic car combat movie, but also found itself unexpectedly lauded by feminists, academia, and culture critics for its progressive narrative, unconventional heroines, and aggressively anti-patriarchal political story themes. And yet this wasn't some Sundance-anointed indie art house darling scraped together on Kickstarter by this or that marginalized film school neophyte. This was a mainstream blockbuster, a nostalgia revival of an 80s tough guy franchise, in fact, directed by a 70-year-old from Brisbane. Think about how nuts that is for a minute. In gaming, that would be like if Mortal Kombat vs. DOA dropped and then a week later a consortium of feminist game critics all ran articles saying, this is the game we've been asking for. So if movies can serve two masters there, and games used to do it all the time, why are we asked to assume that games can't do it now? Because it's good business. That's why. Now, I'm not talking about some kind of conspiracy. In real life, conspiracies for stuff like this don't really happen all that much. In real life, what happens is people, and especially companies, land on beneficial circumstances and then perpetuate them. And while gaming culture increasingly accepting the myth that AAA development must be vapid and intellectually bankrupt, while projects with higher artistic aspirations must relegate themselves to the indie fringe is obviously bad for gaming culture, it's really beneficial to the bottom lines of both extremes of the gaming business. Because just accepting that AAA will only ever aim for the lowest common denominator means developers have even more of an excuse to not spend money, time, and resources on risky things like quality writers or fresh original art assets. Likewise, automatically holding the art game scene to lower standards of production polish significantly reduces the incentive for that scene to, well, continue to raise its game. And that's not to say that all or even most developers of either stripe are consciously exploiting this, but why should we even leave open the possibility? Video games can do better, and so can gamers. The games industry is perfectly clearly content to just let this myth perpetuate as long as it can, but that doesn't mean we have to let them. You don't have to buy the big lie. Did you enjoy the show? If you did, please remember to like it, subscribe to this channel, share it with all of your friends, and tell Screw Attack you want to see more just like it. Remember to check out our great previous episodes and also our other brand new show, In Bob We Trust. Thank you for watching The Game Overthinker.